USAID. This is Mika Hoodboy. I'm the team leader for the strategy team at PPL, and I have my colleague here,
Chelsea Jacquard-Kaufman. I'm on the CLA team in PPL LER.
Welcome to this Wednesday webinar on adaptive management at the strategy level. The occasion of this webinar is PPL has just released 2 how-to notes, one on strategy level portfolio review and one on CDCS mid-course stock taking. And we thought we'd use this occasion to present the 2 side by side, talk about some of the similarities and differences in the processes so that you can understand which one makes sense for where you are in your mission. So the flow of the webinar will be, we'll give you an overview of what's in the how-to notes, and then we're really excited. We have 3 missions on the line: Azerbaijan, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Tanzania, who've recently been through these processes and can bring the experience to life and really talk about what it meant for their mission and how it helped them adaptively manage. We're going to end this webinar, as we always do, with a question and answer period. We're going to try something a little bit different. It's really our presenters. They've lived and breathed these experiences. I'd like to have you, and we'll work out the technicalities, ask them questions, because it's really them who can help everybody think through what these processes could mean for each mission. So with that, let's get into it. So this webinar, Adaptive Management at the Strategy Level. How does this connect to the program cycle? Actually, there's a very direct link to a couple of the principles. So let's get oriented, let's get in the strategy frame of mind. So when your CDCS is approved, they're based on the best available information available at the time. So you've done all your hard work to do analysis, you've consulted with the field, checked in with partners, looked at your budgets, and made some decisions about what it is USAID intends to do over the next, usually 5 years. It's a roadmap for implementation. But one of our tools do not include crystal balls. So we don't always have full knowledge of what's going to happen. So throughout implementation, we need to look at what we're doing and see if we're on the right course and make adjustments. So that's what we mean by adaptive management at the strategy level. You keep gathering evidence, and we'll talk about the different ways you can do that throughout this webinar. And again, as I said before, the really important thing is that we've given you how-to notes, we've given you guidance on how to put it together, but these are customizable process. Each mission is dealing with different realities, and you've got to make your review processes speak to them. So the 2 how-to notes, the content of them is organized exactly the same way. The first part is the core elements of either a stock taking or a CDCS or a strategy level portfolio review. It talks about how to plan the events. Although they're similar, there are some key differences you need to bear in mind as you plan. When you conduct them, we'll talk through some tools and techniques. Actually, the tools and techniques are more in the notes. You'll hear about the techniques from our colleagues in the field. There's different ways you document the process, and follow-up's really important too. So that's the content of the notes. We encourage you to read them, and we'll give you an overview of what's included, and then we will get to the field conversation.
So as we move forward, you'll be hearing Mika's voice and then my voice. So when you hear Mika, she'll be talking about strategy level portfolio review, and when you hear my voice, I'll be talking about the CDCS mid-course document.
So let's look at the purpose of these reviews. Overall purpose is similar. You see in both columns that both processes are about pause and reflect. In talking with people, we've also heard it put another way. People saying, you know, these processes are really useful to look up from what we're doing on a day-to-day basis and really see where it is we're going or where we're not going. So for a strategy level portfolio review, the focus, it's an annual event, and it focuses on the results from the past year. Strategy level portfolio reviews during the last implementation year of the strategy you take a cumulative look of where you were in the beginning and did we really achieve or not achieve what it is we set out to do when we plan that CVCS.
So in the same way, stock takings are also a built-in opportunity for pause and reflect, the difference being that you're looking at the cumulative results from your CVCS implementation to date. It's also an opportunity to check on that alignment between your programming and your context changes. This is the time that you can check and see if those assumptions or any of those context changes are going to need adaptive management to continue to successfully go with your portfolio.
So the planning and conducting processes, which are amply covered in the 2 how-to notes, we'll do a little comparing and contrasting here for you. As I mentioned before, strategy level portfolio review, an annual requirement, and its progress from the last year of implementation. Generally speaking, a strategy level portfolio review is a process that's internal to the mission, where you're very much looking at the results from activities and projects, how's everything adding up to the DOs. There are opportunities for external participation, and just to foreshadow for you, one of our presenters is going to talk about how they involve external participation in their strategy level portfolio review. Again, that being said, strategy level review being portfolio review being an internal look, generally it's done through internal facilitation in the mission.
So with the stock taking, as we've mentioned before, it's required only once during that strategy implementation period. Though it's not required to be at exactly the 2.5-year point, it can be flexible based on the needs of the mission. And it usually can take place of that strategy level portfolio review for the year. The main difference being that in your planning process for a stock taking, you want to make sure that you set mission-specific objectives. They can be tailored to be what your mission needs, but that's the place where it helps have a more successful stock taking when the mission is clear on what those objectives are that they're covering. For some of the formats, there's a lot of flexibility. You can tailor the process again, and we look for innovations and creativity, but you can do it internally or have it externally focused as well by having partners such as your host government, other donors, your implementing partners. Usually you have planning teams and or working groups that help through the planning process, though you do want to make sure that too many decisions are not made in those pre-meetings so that there is work to be done in the actual stock taking itself. And then you also may want to consider having external facilitation as a way to more successfully get through the process. I do want to mention that we have an online module coming that we are working on for the CVCS mid-course stock taking that really works as almost a virtual TDY to walk you through the planning and conducting phases of a stock taking. It should be ready early 2018, so I'll have more information on that soon. Also, we want to make sure for both portfolio reviews and stock taking that you keep in mind the enabling conditions such as culture and openness and honesty so that you can have great direct conversations about what's happening in the portfolio.
So what do you cover during the 2 events? Strategy level portfolio review. So that's your annual progress. You're looking at results from your performance monitoring, and you're aggregating it up to see if you're achieving your strategic goals. The how-to note talks about how you review your development hypothesis, assumptions and risks, and changes to context as part of this event. So let me reiterate, I said in the beginning, when the strategy is approved, we don't have perfect information, and even a year into implementation, 6 months into implementation, sometimes there's changes in the context. So this is an opportunity to look at your if-then statements and see if they still hold true. I've had many, in my work on the strategy team, had many people say, 3 years into a strategy, well, it's no longer relevant, it's out of date. This is the maintenance work that you do to keep your strategy fresh. So if you see changes and your development hypothesis is not describing what it is you intend to do, those are the opportunities to adaptively manage what you're doing. It may be tweaks to a particular project. It may be a need for offices to work more closely together on a common problem. Those are the kinds of things that emerge. And of course, the core of portfolio reviews is looking at the budget, staffing, and management resources needed for implementation. And that, too, tends to change on an annual basis.
So for the stock taking, it's every single one of the items that Mika just mentioned, the difference being that it's that cumulative progress on results. And it's still that chance to examine your development hypothesis, your assumptions, your risks, your context changes, and making sure that everything is adding up. And because there's doing so much planning and pre-work to that, it's almost a chance to dive a little bit deeper into that. It's also a great opportunity to build staff knowledge and support staff transition, because many missions have found that when they do their mid-course stock taking, that there was not a single FSO or American that was there when the strategy was written. So this is a great time to sort of bring everyone back on board. It's another opportunity to re-engage stakeholders that may have been involved in the CDCS development, to bring them back in to get their perspective and to update them on where you are.
So in terms of evidence, when you're doing your annual strategy level portfolio review, the focus tends to be on evidence and lessons that emerged in the past year of implementation. So this is when you want to look at any evaluations that may have come out, any assessments, new analysis. Was there a key meeting with a partner or with the government that shed some light on the current conditions for implementation? That's the thing to focus on during those. You do have some decisions to make, generally speaking, about analysis and evidence and how much you want people to do pre-reading, how much you want to have people listen to presentations during the portfolio review or the stock taking. And so this is where the planning really makes a difference. There's a key finding from your analysis and evidence. You need a whole mission to get their brains around it. Think about that as you plan your stock taking. So there's that bundle of evidence that's generated, and then you're looking back at your plan. Your strategy to get it approved has an MEL section where you lay out what it is you think you need to know to keep your strategy fresh, to manage it well. So we ask people to, when they get their strategy approved, to identify any gaps in knowledge, things that they need to find out. So this annual review is an opportunity to look at where you are on that. Since our contexts do change, very often it does emerge that there are new things that we need to know in order to be able to monitor the context. And so during the review, that's a good time to identify any knowledge gaps that recently came up.
With the stock takings, you're still taking stock of all the evidence that's out there. The main source for that is usually your previous portfolio reviews, in addition to the monitoring data of the evaluations that have come out, any learning events that you may have had, and any collaborative team learning that has come about. You also want to consider what the analytical agenda may be for your next strategy. What are the things that you want to find out before you start planning your next strategy? You also want to look at those strategy level learning questions that may be in your CLA plan. And you still have that chance to address knowledge gaps, both from your CDCS implementation period, but also look into those gaps as you lead into what you are looking to do for your new strategy.
For your portfolio reviews, these are internal to missions, and therefore any action planning also remains internal to the mission. It's important to build in time into your review to actually have some time to do the planning, to get consensus around that, and then that's internal to the mission. It's very helpful if you can break down your action plan into your short-term responses, which may be a management decision or a need to put in for different staff, which can be more medium and long-term. But there's also things, if you're looking at your development hypothesis, you're saying, hey, there's a body of work that we do. Circumstances may be different in 2 years. When we redesign that project 2-3 years down the line, which is more the long term, let's put a pin in thinking through the evidence and seeing if we're going to need to make an adjustment down the line. Again, this is all internal. This is your action planning to keep your CDCS and projects underneath it fresh during implementation.
And for the stock taking, there is a required information memo that is part of the new ADS 201 requirements. that there is a template available that we have on our links for how to proceed with that. It should include all of your plans for adapting that come out of your stock taking. This is actually a built-in opportunity for knowledge management. It is something we are not great at as an agency, so here we are laying it at your feet. Here's your way to document your plans for adapting. It's also the way that you can record any changes that you plan on making to your actual strategy, any IRs, DOs, any changes like that. And it has to be submitted to your geographic bureau in USAID Washington.
So to wrap up the presentation portion of this, hope that what Chelsea and I have outlined for you helps you get a better sense of what we actually mean by adaptive management and learning at the strategy level. The important thing here, keeping your strategy fresh, that requires us to be very deliberate about what we're looking at, and it enables us to do that continuous reflection that helps keep our programming current. This is also how you get your arms around the evidence and analysis and evaluations that you're doing. You really are very deliberate, and you're looking at the information, and you're making strategic choices based on the evidence that we have and the people that we talk to. This is how we stay nimble and respond to changes in the context and any new information. And it also helps us look forward. When you do these processes and you monitor changes in context as they evolve, it helps us not get blindsided when things happen in the future. So we have our finger on the pulse of what's going on, but then that helps us look at the trends and be more aware of what might be coming up down the road, and we can be prepared. The difference between, I think, proactive adaptive management and being reactive, that's quite distinct. And without knowledge management, we will be reacting, and we won't be able to plan ahead and kind of anticipate the world that we live in. And that's that follow-up action planning, whether it's management decisions, shifting around staff, different relationships with partners. That's for us to, again, stay nimble and keep our work relevant. So with that, we'll have a just tiny little other plug here for our online module that we are creating for guidance on mid-course stock taking. This is a screenshot from the draft that we are in right now. It will be available in early 2018. It walks you through the planning process to give you step-by-step advice. It also has an accompanying worksheet that has you work through the details as your own mission to come up with a draft plan, a draft timeline, and a draft agenda by the end of the workshop, which makes it a very useful tool for missions. It's not a training. It's an actual tool that you can use to prepare for the process. So, and it uses case studies from Malawi, Mozambique, Cambodia, and Jamaica. So we have real-life examples all throughout, and we are excited to share that with you soon. Great. All right. So we will start our conversation with the field because we know that you get tired of hearing from Washington, so let's hear from someone else. So for Tim, Jonathan, and David, can you please let us know what was your planning process like that you used? David will be speaking primarily to portfolio reviews, but he also helps conduct at least 2 other stock takings. So David, feel free to answer in your experience with stock takings as well. Please go ahead. Maybe let's start with Tim.
Hi everyone, this is Tim Stein.
Tim, can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about the planning process that DRC used?
Yeah, so yes, I'm Tim Stein, the program officer in the DRC. About 2 years into our CDCS, we tried to analyze where we were in the process, and we were a little bit behind in some of the more formal data collection efforts that would be necessary in order to do a deep dive review of our performance to date. So we tried to identify what was unique to our mission and what we could address at this time. And we really tried to hone in on the management challenges to implementing an integrated strategy. We have 3 development objectives that are completely integrated. most of our programs traverse all three mission objectives, and we had a unique management structure to ensure that all technical teams were able to contribute to all those objectives. We had some success in doing that, but also we knew that there was a level of frustration and some concerns that it was not as purposeful or getting the added value that we wanted. So what we did was we did a series of key informant interviews with some people who are participating in those DO and TO teams, as well as team leaders in the front office, and it really painted a picture of the challenges that we were facing, both in terms of sort of administrative management issues, but the impact it would have on our programs. So when we designed a mid-course portfolio review, we did focus on sectoral results and how they were not contributing to the overall objectives, but we really tried to hone in on those management questions. So we had both perspectives from DO team leaders and technical teams, and we had a series of taskers that they had to be able to report on, which kind of gave qualitative assessments of how the programs were impacted by this integrated approach and where their management challenges were. And we divided the stock-taking exercise into 2 days. So day one was really focused on our results in these management questions. And at the end of day one, we were able to get a handful of themes that were presented in every single person's presentation. And then what we did was we sat on it for a day, and the program office and our M&E contract in the front office reflected on what those challenges were. And then on day two, we tried to workshop through some of the answers. And what I really liked was some of the challenges that were raised. What I really liked about this stock-taking exercise is that it wasn't really just focused on a litany of problems. It really tried to workshop through the problems to think through how we're going to reform. So we did a whole day worth of workshopping, lots of breakout groups, rotated people around, and tried to come up with some concrete resolutions to some of these problems. And that really triggered a whole series of events that happened over the course of 3 months, where we dissolved our mission, how we were organizing our integrated teams, and developed a whole new range of CLA platforms in the mission, which I can get into if people like. But I think the key takeaway for our stock taking was one that we were not, although we did address myriad issues, we really tried to focus on what was unique to us and where we were at that time, and that was on management issues, and we focused really deeply on that. And secondly, we took the time, and it wasn't a 15-minute after action, what can we do about it? We spent the whole day trying to resolve the issues as a mission rather than just discussing problems and indicators and whatnot.
That's great, Tim. Thank you so much. I know, having lived through that strategy, coming from Congo before coming here, I can appreciate what they went through, and I think it's great that you had that focus on solutions instead of continuing to chat about problems, which is a great way forward for a stock taking. Jonathan, can we hear from Tanzania about what it was like for your planning process?
Sure. So this is Jonathan Young, and I'm a program officer here in Tanzania. And as far as the planning was concerned, I think for us what we first did is we talked with our front office to get a sense of what sort of changes were on the table. And I think that initial discussion helped us focus. We agreed at that moment that we were looking at IR level changes and not at the DO level. So with that start, then we identified what sort of stakeholders we needed to engage. So both the internal stakeholders of our DO teams, but then also our implementing partners and our government counterparts and our local partners. So for us in Tanzania, there had been a new administration in place in 2015. So this was a very large event that had changed the context and had changed our operating environment. So this was a lot of what we wanted to focus on. So we were thinking through how best to get a pulse on how things had changed. So in the planning stage, first we were thinking of, which stakeholders to engage, but then what methods would we use to actually get that evidence. So for the DRG space, where we're looking at a democratic closing space within Tanzania, is we form teams that would actually go out in the field and do qualitative survey work, like focus group discussions and key informant interviews. So that was one arm of the stock taking to get at the more contextual, less formal data that's out there. And then what we also did is identified, which, like the demographic health survey had just come out, the agriculture survey had come out. So we formed teams, internal working group teams, to analyze the data that had come through those reports and basically organize it around the intermediate results to get a sense of, are we on track? What sort of changes do we need to make? And it was built around the portfolio review, the strategic portfolio review. So we combined the process. The portfolio review was in January. So we built it around gathering the evidence, in November, mostly October and November, working with, a few retreats that were going on at the time to engage with our internal folks, and then to actually put the information out there as part of the portfolio review presentation.
Great, that is so helpful. I love how just hearing from 2 missions, we already got to see how customizable this process is. I think that's really great. I think the key informant interviews that you did in the field to inform your contextual narrative is a really great tool that I hope more missions take advantage of. David, so in terms of portfolio reviews and the planning process, can you talk us through what you all just did in Azerbaijan, just a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah, sure. I have to first say that it's great to be speaking on the webinar from this side of the table instead of from the Washington side. I got out here 4 months ago and was able to convince our mission director of my crazy idea to go out and do a field-based portfolio review. So it was great to, I've been promoting these type of pushing the envelope on program cycle processes for the last 2 years in PPL. So it was great to actually get a chance to practice what I preach. For those of you who know me pretty well, you know that I come up with fake fictional titles in my email signature line. For the past couple months, I've been the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Field-Based Portfolio Reviews. I have brought with me my Minister of Field-Based Portfolio Reviews, Tamila Mamadova, and she's going to speak a couple minutes about the planning process that we went through.
Hi everyone, I'm Tamila Mamadova. I'm working for USAID Azerbaijan Program Office. This year the mission decided to do a portfolio review differently from what we would normally do in the office, with participation of all the technical staff and going through the successes and challenges we had and going through indicators that worked and the targets that we couldn't meet, etc. But this year we decided to have it in the field with participation of our implementing partners. So the selection of site was critical because this year we wanted to have interactive sessions, and not only in the groups and in the closed format, but also visit our site to show the actual work that is being done. We wanted to not only hear about successes and challenges that the activities are facing, but also we wanted to show the products of our activities and find the ways to collaborate and bring our partners to together to find the ways to collaborate more. And so that was one of the objectives we had. So we had invited our implementing partners and also spread our invitation to other ENA missions and also our regional support office from Georgia, as well as ENA participation. We conducted sessions and made a lot of, not a lot of, but a couple of site visits to the active programs we have in the field, and also we took initiative and invited our partners to make presentations of their activities, and also prepared some video clips that for the virtual site that we couldn't visit. So one of the, I think, successes of this was that we gave opportunity to our partners to learn more about the other activities that USAID is funding in Azerbaijan, and also build the networks and new collaboration opportunities for them.
I guess the only thing I would add to that is, since we did a field-based portfolio review, we had one person specifically dedicated to the logistics effort. So I would highly recommend that for any person who's undergoing a stock taking process or a field portfolio review. Logistics is so important, and she was able to do that seamlessly, and we had absolutely no issues out in the field. Thanks.
Great, that's amazing. I love highlighting these new and innovative things that missions are doing. I also think it's great that the kind of network and collaboration that you guys are building into your partners that will probably continue to pay benefits for throughout the life of those activities. If we can quickly go through maybe that same cycle again, but maybe slightly shorter answers, because I think some of you already got into it, telling us just what you think worked really well, and then at the same time, maybe what did not go well, so that you can better inform other missions on going through this, maybe some lessons learned and cautionary tales, both in your planning and conducting. So Tim, we want to start with you again?
Yeah, I think, again, the best thing would be a day two really focused on what you're going to do about it. That really helped. I think the biggest challenge in putting these things together is the clarity of the question or questions that you're asking early on, perhaps 6 weeks in advance or so, that gets consensus by teams in the front office. And when you have that clarity of the question, then all the preparatory tasks that you give teams to get the right data, the right information becomes clear. I think for us, we had some vague questions, and we sent out taskers, and we weren't quite getting the answer we wanted, and then we moved the goalpost a little bit, and we kept going back and forth with them. So I thought we were on track by planning it before Christmas and then doing it late January, and I think that was good, but then you need the clarity of that question, and don't try to answer everything.
Awesome. It's almost like you are reading our minds and knowing what's coming in our online module. Thank you. Jonathan, do you have anything you would like to add about what worked well for you all and maybe what didn't?
Yes. So getting out to the field to do the focus group discussions and the came form and interviews were critical. It was internally led. Our DO lead was a big part of that process. And I think that was key to the actual adaptation that happened later, where we restructured the actual result framework for that particular DO, and we developed a pad, and we awarded 3 new awards. So we got that buy-in right from the beginning, so that was a process that worked out really well. One that didn't work out so well were surveys. So we were really trying to reach our implementing partners and also our consultative group, which is a group of folks that are both government leaders, but mostly CSO leaders, and to kind of advise us on how the CDCS is proceeding. And the surveys, we got a low response rate. So we thought that it would be a good vehicle to get anonymous feedback. And I think because we have so many IPs, that when we only got responses of like 10 to 15, it was hard to use the results. So I think for us, it would have been much better to bring folks in, to have meetings to discuss these things in real time. The surveys didn't work out so well for us.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And over to our Ministry of, what is it called again? Ministry of Field-Based Portfolio Reviews. What do you all have to add about some lessons learned and maybe cautionary tales about what worked and what didn't?
So our mission director is actually spying in on this webinar, so try not to be too honest. No, I'm just kidding. No, we had a ton of stuff go well. I mean, almost too much to talk about. Like I mentioned before, logistics went amazing. I did a facilitation training with our small group facilitators prior to the portfolio review to get them ready and prepared for how to facilitate all the small group discussions we were having. I think that really went really well. It definitely paid off during the portfolio review itself, and gave them some capacity building and some a chance to do something that they don't normally get to do. We identified a lot of great stuff came out during the portfolio review. So we identified that a lot of partners were specifically requesting training on monitoring, evaluation, and learning. So we're gonna follow up with that. And we focused the portfolio review as an adaptive management tool. So everything we did was geared towards developing, having each partner develop an action plan at the end of the portfolio review. And we did three different sessions over the 3.5 days that we were with them to get them prepared for that, and to get them to have different types of action items. So action items to address current challenges that they saw, action items to build on what was already going really well. We did a lot in terms of collaboration and putting them together to identify where they could better collaborate. So a lot of the action items came out of that. And then we did have a part in the portfolio review where we really looked forward towards a new strategic direction that we wanted to take. And so we also had them discuss that and come up with some action items regarding that. Some things we could have done better. As Tamila mentioned, we had some of the partners do what we call virtual site visits since we couldn't actually get to their sites. They were pretty uneven. I think a lot of them didn't really understand what we were expecting from them. And so a couple of the partners did a phenomenal job. A couple of others, they did kind of your standard presentation rather than an innovative virtual presentation like we were hoping for. In the site visits themselves, we had one partner that we got out there and the community just they gave really long speeches, and we didn't get a chance to really go into depth about the activity itself. I do want to note that they did adapt, and the next day, they did a phenomenal job on the second site visit. We went out with them, so that was great. I guess the last thing I just want to mention is expectations. We thought we were very clear with our expectations from the partners, and I think we could have done a better job on explaining to them what we were really hoping to get out of the portfolio reviews and making them feel more at ease on the first day. I think a lot of them walked into it with that traditional kind of client contractor relationship, and that was really what we were trying to change over the course of the week, and we did. But I wish we had done a little bit more on the front side of preparing them and setting that expectation in advance. So that's what I have for that. Thanks.
Thanks so much, David. I also love that you actually went ahead and answered this last section of the questions about adaptive management and how these processes helped you to adaptively manage by using these action plans with the IPs. You're actually getting at the adaptive management right at the source. So that's great, and I hope more people can take away that idea. So if there is just one more quick idea, either from Tim or Jonathan, about how these processes help support adaptive management, any final quip you can give, because I do want to make sure we have a few minutes for questions.
No, I think I covered everything for us, unless you wanted to go into the specifics of how we adapted.
No,
yeah, I think
yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think for us, we wanted everyone within the mission to understand what sort of adaptations were on the table. I think for folks, when you use that term, they're not sure what that would mean, whether it's at the work plan level, whether it's within a contract, whether it would be a contract modification at the strategic level, at the results framework. So I think for us, we really honed in on a particular DO that really wanted to rethink the result framework, which we knew would result in a new project appraisal document along with new awards. So that was done in the very beginning. And so stocktaking was a process that helped everyone get on board in the beginning. And then when we actually had to do the documentation work after the stocktaking, it was much quicker.